Well, to unpack this, I'm joined by Ladi Kwaja, head fixed income and Forex Chapel Hill, Denham. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you very much, Rachel, for having me this morning.
All right, we've seen some gains in the foreign exchange market, with analysts projecting that it would further appreciate to 1,200 Naira. I mean, do you also see that happening? Why? And if yes, how soon?
Well, I think that's very bullish. And of course, analysts are looking at the level of gain, and you are looking at some of the impacts of or the expectation around some of the good news that we have had around Nigeria. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of people are thinking that it might actually touch that level. Of course, we've even seen someone mention that it can actually test the 1,000 levels. And of course, nothing is impossible, because when you look at where we were coming from, at the point in time we were at 790 before we saw that huge jump, and we climaxed at 1,900, and here we are now at 1,300 levels. So I think what we have seen between the 1,900 and the current level is backed by reforms that the government has actually taken. Of course, they are painstaking, but of course, we have started seeing part of the good reward of some of these painful reforms.
Well, that's quite interesting. I would like you to tell me what you think. I mean, what level do you see the Naira touching before we move on?
Well, with this level, and don't forget that the central bank is also watching the market, and of course, they will not allow Naira to just continue to gain aggressively, of course, and that's one of the reasons why we are currently on a managed floating system. Just yesterday, the central bank was also in the market. But rather than supplying to the market, they are also part of the buyers in the market yesterday. So what the central bank is trying to do is to also ensure stability in the FX market. And when you look at where the budget, the benchmark for the budget for this year, which is at 1,400, I don't think we'll get far from that. So I would rather will stay around 1,250 to 1,350 range.
Right. Now, this appreciation, is it driven by fundamentals or a temporary prop-up, as some call it? What do you, I mean, I know you've talked about some fundamentals earlier, but we also see the CBN activities and, stuff in that regard. So talk to us. Which do you think, drives this more?
Well, I think it's more fundamental because, of course, the first thing you look at you look at the fact that Nigeria looks more like a destination that can actually rehouse some of these investments. Before now, don't forget, sometimes last year we were actually removed from the grey list of FATF, and which also means that it allows inflow of funds easily into our market. And I think that's one of the foremost gain that we actually mentioned at that particular point in time. And I remember I mentioned on this station that this will actually open up Nigeria for us in a destination for investment. And we are currently seeing some of that now. And also, we've seen a level of attractive investment opportunity for portfolio investors in Nigeria. Of course, we've seen analysts that are of the view that portfolio investments inflow, they are short-lived, and also share that sentiment because they are hot money. But don't also forget that they are more like the first step to any economy that is recovering, because they are actually the first person that will actually test the economy to see before you start seeing influx of foreign direct investments into our market. If you look at the capital importation report that was released for last year, a total of 6 billion actually came into the system. 80% of it is for portfolio foreign portfolio investor, and just 5% of it is for foreign direct investors. So it simply means that most of these funds that's actually coming into the market, they are more like hot money. And they are actually, so the effect of this is that when there's any crisis, there's every tendency that we may actually see a bit of pressure on the currency, because most of these people want to live and will actually witness a more like capital investor.
Well, I like what you said. I mean, you answered the question. Even though you started by saying there are fundamentals, you also got to the part where you talked about the FPIs and the impact they are having. Now, you talked about threats. What threats what can these threats be really that can then maybe change the dynamics?
Well, we've seen many of recent. So this currently global market is actually very sensitive. Don't forget, April 1st last year, that was the Liberation Day. And suddenly we noticed announcement of tariff that put pressure on global markets, and that also put a bit of pressure on the currency, if you remember vividly, at that particular point in time. And Naira headed towards 1,600 at the official window. But one good thing that we actually celebrated the current CB administration for is that they did not panic. And why I say they did not panic is that they did not rush to start supplying to the market. They allow market to actually find a level. And when there's paucity of supply to the market, they come in that level, at that particular level, to actually supply to the market. So they were not forcing rates to actually go down by itself. They allow market forces to determine the forces of demand and supply to determine price. And we saw how that market actually transformed from that level. As market now confidence returned back to the market, and we noticed a bit of reversal in rates. We went back to around 1,400 and something level. So when you look at that for that person, it simply means that a lot of things can happen within this time. The President of the United States could come up with policy that can actually affect global economy. And for example, now the current U.S. Fed chairman, for me, is a bit hawkish. Of course, who we are expecting the President of the United States to actually appoint is someone that would have been dovish. But when you look at the antecedents of Kevin Walsh, he is more hawkish than even Jerome, which is the current Fed chairman. So if that is the case, and he decides to be a big hawkish, what it will mean is that we will see elevated rates in the United States. And when you see elevated rates, you're going to see stronger dollar. And how would you see some stronger dollar? It means that we'll likely see a lot of funds going back to the US since there are other attractive investments in the US, and that will put a bit of pressure on emerging market currency. And that's one of the things, one of so many things that could happen that could be more like a threat to the currency.
Well, we'll see some fundamentals on the horizon, whether you want to talk about Dangote Refinery, 650,000 capacity, which it was able to meet sometime in the past week. And, maybe you also want to look at some of the fundamentals. Are these able to offset whatever threat comes from a stronger dollar?
Well, I think so. Because if you remember, I mentioned something that happened last year, April, and I mentioned how we were able to weather the storm. Currently, and generally speaking, I'm not surprised at where currency is trading, and I'm sure you know that very well because I've highlighted this several times on your show. And one of the reasons is that sometimes you don't tend to see immediate result on some of these policies or some of the happenings in the country. And when we all talked about the arrival of Dangote Refinery, the first thing analysts were looking at what would be the impact on the economy. So it simply means that if Nigeria has been actually using about 45% of its the FX generated to actually import refined product, and we are having Dangote internally, it simply means that we may not be using as much as that. What that would mean is that we'll see better pressure on the reserve, and when you see better pressure on the reserve, it simply means that the central bank has more firepower to actually supply the market. And of course, we have started seeing some of the impact, and that's one of the reasons why one of the richest man in Nigeria mentioned that the currency can actually trade as low as 1,000 Naira. And of course, it is not impossible when you look at the trajectory or the line at which we are traveling. And also beyond that, also there are many other factors that we have seen a lot of great policies on the part of the central bank governor. Don't forget, December 2024, the FM window was actually inaugurated. And between that then and now, we've seen a bit of stability on the currency side. We've seen Naira being stable. We've seen a market where we can actually, there's price discovery, there's market debt, and also there's transparency. And that to a great extent also help the activity we have seen in the FX market. And just last week also, the central bank noticed that the gap between the official window and the parallel window is actually widening further. And of course, we saw the reform they're currently doing with the BTC guy on how they actually moved from over 5,000 BTC to currently the license 82. Of course, the window is still open for anyone that actually wants to come. But for you to actually be listed, it means that you need to meet the requirement. And part of the requirement is the capital required. If you want a tier 1 license, you need about 2 billion. If you want a tier 2 license, you need about 500 million.
All right.
So it simply means that That's to a great extent as there are some of the things that is actually giving market confidence, and some of the things that is leading to the appreciation of the currency.
All right, thank you so much, Oladipo Ajayi, Head Fixed Income and Forex, Chapel Hill, Denham. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us.